Welcome to Towson University alumni, faculty, staff, and friends. I am Jenna Mills, the Director of Alumni Engagement Programs and a proud 2009 and 2016 graduate of Towson University. Thank you for joining us today for this webinar, Influential Women in TU's History. Joining me today from the Towson University Alumni Relations team to help with this presentation is Steve Rosenfeld, Director of the Alumni Communication and Recognition. Today we have alumni from 1959 the whole way up to 2015, and even some of our soon-to-be newest Tiger grads joining us from states like Delaware, Florida, Maryland, New York, North Carolina, and Vermont. Before I introduce today's speaker, I do want to share a few housekeeping notes. We are recording this session, and we do plan to share it with everyone who registered when it is finalized. Please be patient with us, as it does take a few weeks for it to be added to our YouTube page, but I will email everyone when it is ready. Attendees will remain muted throughout the discussion. If you have any questions, though, we'd love to hear from you. Please use the chat function in your window and direct your question to all attendees. We will monitor the questions throughout the session, and our speaker today can answer questions at the end of the presentation. I'd now like to introduce today's speaker. Felicity Knox is a 1994 TU graduate and a library associate in the Special Collections and Archives Department in Towson University's Albert S. Cook Library. Felicity began her career at TU in 2000 and joined the Archives Department in 2009. She assists researchers, works with students, writes articles for the Archives blog, and runs the department's social media platforms. Felicity is an author of the book Towson University, The First 150 Years, a photo book celebrating Towson University's founders and rich history in conjunction with the 150th anniversary celebrations of TU. Felicity, thank you so much for joining us today.
And as always, I thank you for having me. So I am going to share my screen, which is always exciting because who knows what's going to happen. Yay. Okay. So at the end of 2020, Jenna suggested that we do a presentation. This is a presentation topic, and I thought it was inspired. Towson University and all its previous iterations have always had strong women as leaders and faculty, staff, and students alike. So I'm really glad to have the opportunity to celebrate them and us. And just in case you were curious, this is a really great graphic from the 1934 yearbook. It shows silhouettes of all the faculty members on 2 pages, and then the whole yearbook itself is designed like something out of the 1927 film Metropolis. Move things around so I can see better. Okay. Move. There we go. So, sorry, bear with me. I'm going to use a lot of acronyms in this presentation, so let's go over a really quick history so I don't confuse you as I, talk my way through everything. We were founded by the state in 1866 to train teachers, and at that point, teachers were teachers training schools were called normal schools because they taught norms or standards, and we abbreviated that as MSNS. And then enrollment was usually small and steady. The school itself began in rented halls in Mount Vernon, and then in 1876, it transitioned to a building in West Baltimore at the corner of Carrollton and Lafayette Avenues, and it was a 2-year program, and after that, you were given a certificate that showed you could teach in the state of Maryland. We moved to Towson in 1915, and by 1935, the state demanded that teachers hold bachelor degrees, so we transitioned to a 4-year college called the State Teachers College at Towson to differentiate it from the other state teachers colleges in the area. In 1963, we changed again, refocusing our programming as the state see the coming enrollment boom, which coincides with the baby boom generation, and all the state teachers colleges become liberal arts colleges, and we become TSC, Towson State College. A desire to elevate the name to match the kind of education offered was behind the name change to Towson State University in 1976, also TSU. And in 1997, the desire to attract students from outside of Maryland was one reason given for dropping the word state from our name. And of course, a lack of robust state funding was another reason, but that's when we became TU. So that quick history lesson. So this photo was taken in the fall of 2019 before the completion of the new science building, but I think it's a great photo of campus. I actually really like it because you can see so much of campus. In the front here, we have the iconic Stevens Hall with Newell and Richmond in line, and then the rest of the campus spreads west. Let's see, we can see Smith Hall, which is here, right? This is a little tricky from this vantage point. And then there's Linthicum over here, and then the Burdick is back here. It looks like it was still under construction when this photo was taken too, renovation. And then it's really hard to see, but tucked back here is the Center for the Arts. And then all the way back to West Village here, and then over here is United States Stadium. On the right of the photo, however, we've lost sight of some of the dormitories, Prettyman and Scarborough, and the old healthcare center, Dowell, as well as the newly created health complex at Ward and West Halls. This campus has over 60 buildings, and about 15 of them have been named for influential people related to Towson, many of whom I mentioned as we were going through the map there. West Village doesn't count, as those were named after influential Marylanders, but they didn't really have ties to the school. So of those 15, only 3 are named after women, and as has been the case in the past, one of those buildings is about to be razed for campus growth, and another is in danger of joining it soon. So who are the 3? What are the other buildings named after women that we've lost? And if we had the ability, whose name should we put up for consideration? So naming buildings is really tricky, right? You want to make sure you pick the right people who don't have skeletons in their closet. And I'd still like to offer some contenders, although I should caution that if I don't name your favorite teacher or administrator on campus, I mean absolutely no offense. 11 years into this job, I am still learning about TU's history every day. But first, let's talk about the buildings we currently have and those we have lost or will lose soon. I'm in the wrong screen and I'm pulling up all sorts of things you don't care about. Dual monitors are tricky. Okay, so the first building was named after a woman is this one. This is Richmond Hall, which opened in 1924. And as many folks know, it was named for Sarah Richmond. She graduated from the Maryland State Normal School as a member of its first class in 1866. She was already an experienced educator by that point, and rather than go off into the world as a state-trained teacher, she stayed at MSNS to pay it forward to generations of students. She worked as a math teacher and then an assistant to the school leader, which was at that time known as the principal. And she herself became principal in 1909, the first female leader of the school. Her primary mission during her time in this role was to move the school from its location in Baltimore to a space that would offer room to grow and the opportunity for greater student experiences. For Richmond, this meant dormitories and wide open spaces. She had rich connections as both a school leader, but also as an alum. She was able to convince the state that the need for MSNS to move was imperative. And so Richmond is why TU is known as Towson University. That move in 1915 changed the very trajectory of the school we now know, even its name. So these are the last 2 of the 3 buildings that are named after women. On the left, we have Scarborough Hall. It's named after Mary Hudson Scarborough, who was a member of the Maryland State Normal class of 1891. She served as the principal of the model school from 1899 until 1907. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit. In 1964, Towson named a dormitory after her. And on the right is Dowell Health Center, which served as the health facility on campus from 1963 until 2014. It's named after Anita S. Dowell, who taught health education classes from 1913 until 1953. She also served as an assistant to the president from 1950 until 1953. Both of these buildings are slated to be razed for campus expansion projects in the future. And at that point, we will only have Richmond's. So what buildings have we lost? For 100 years, as part of the goal to create a robust experience for students, there was an elementary school on campus, which was intended to be a learning lab for student teachers. It was known by many different names, including the model school, the lab school, and the campus elementary school. In 1942, the school was named after this woman, Dr. Lyda Lee Tall. Tall came to the Maryland State Normal School as its second female leader in 1920. She was already well known and well respected throughout the education field. She taught for years in elementary schools in Baltimore City and had been an instructor at the Baltimore City Teachers Training School, which was another teacher school like MSNS. It was another teachers training school. In 1908, she became the supervisor of grammar grades in Baltimore County. And in 1918, she left the state completely to become the principal of the lab school at the Teachers College at Columbia University, which is that's like the place to go if you want to be a teacher. After 2 years, she was wooed back by the state to take charge of MSNS. Her tenure at Towson was marked by immense change and growth such as would not be seen again until the 1960s. The Baltimore City Teachers Training School merged with MSNS in 1924, which caused enrollment to skyrocket as students transferred to the Towson School, but enrollment would be later rocked by fallout from the Great Depression. Tall was the school leader when we transitioned from a normal school to a teacher's college in 1935. This allowed the school to award 4-year Bachelor of Science degrees in education. The school's name changed to the State Teachers College at Towson, and Tall's title was changed to president. But what Tall brought to the school was more than the desire for students to have rigorous academic experience. Under Tall's leadership, the school developed a student newspaper. At first, it was named after MSNS, then they renamed it the Oriole, and finally, it was given its current name, the Tower Light, in 1926. Student organizations were developed and encouraged. The medieval dinners in December began under Tall, as did spirited May Day celebrations. Tall invited senior students to have tea with her at the President's House, now known as Glen Ask. Students traveled to New York to see what the world outside of Towson or their home counties was like. And under Tall, the campus itself grew. As I previously noted, the Richmond Hall Dormitory was opened in 1924. In 1933, a separate building for the campus elementary school was constructed, and after Tall's death, it was named for her. In 1960, a larger building was constructed, and the old building was renamed Van Bocklin Hall after the man who actually wrote the bill to start the Maryland State Normal School. And that building still stands. But the building that was known as the Lyda Lee Tall School for almost 50 years, starting in 1960, was raised to make space for the current College of Liberal Arts in 2006. Tall was succeeded by this woman, Dr. M. Teresa Wiedefeld, in 1938. Like Richmond, Wiedefeld was a graduate of MSNS. She was in the class of 1904. She returned briefly to work as a teacher and principal of that model school from 1914 until 1919. And at that point, she went to work for Anne Arundel County Schools. Before her return to Towson, she was the supervisor of elementary schools for the state of Maryland. Like her predecessor, Wiedefeld led the school through a time of uncertainty. World War II saw a steep decline in enrollment as students and faculty alike were drafted or enrolled in wartime efforts. And meanwhile, the state was facing a shortage of teachers. Wiedefeld's solution to this was two-pronged. Her administration changed the programming for students, creating an accelerated program so students could graduate in 3 years instead of 4. And the creation of the junior college in 1946 allowed the school to expand its program offering. Essentially, students could earn 2 years of credits at STC and then transfer to a liberal arts college of their choice. While this program was vital to attracting those with GI Bill money, namely men, the upshot was that it allowed the school to begin laying the groundwork that would prove necessary in 1963 when we transitioned to a liberal arts school, which is what makes the fact that the building named after Wiedefeld was a gymnasium so amazing to me, because we brought more men onto campus, interest in male sports programs grew. If we had not made the transition to a liberal arts college in 1963, we would not have been able to field a football team just a few years later. However, just at about the same time that football team took the field in 1969, we opened a new gym on campus, and the old Wiedefeld gym was raised to make way for the current Cook Library. Oh, sorry, notes. Having only one building on campus named after a woman is probably something we'll want to address if we continue to name buildings after people. The school was never a women-only institution, but the reality is that the school has long been a place of opportunity for women. At a time when women didn't have a lot of options for their own economic stability and success, the ability to go to school, become a teacher, to know that the state would invest in them as teachers and also offer them the ability to retire was precious and life-changing. For years, this school has given women the ability to change their future, and it was usually a woman who was helping make that difference. In 1932, MSNS hired a new registrar, Rebecca Tansel. She hailed from Georgia and was herself a graduate of a teacher's college program in a school that is now part of Vanderbilt University in Tennessee. And MSNS transitioned to a state teacher's college. Oh, as we did, Tansel worked to support teaching students and new teachers. Her care for Towson became clearly evident during World War II when she became the liaison between the school and those who were serving in the armed forces. She wrote newsletters which helped keep everyone at home and abroad updated about what was happening within the STC community, who was serving where, as well as changes that were happening on campus. She also crafted and sent out a survey to service members to collect information. And when any service members came to campus, she'd photograph them in uniform standing on the steps of Stevens Hall. She began collecting these photographs and any letters that they sent into a scrapbook. Ultimately, these pages would add up to about 200 service members, and we now hold the material as part of our World War II collection. Tansel's work at STC also helped spur the junior college program instituted by Wiedefeld. By 1948, she was named the director of admissions, and by the 1950s, she was teaching Spanish in the Modern Languages department. As I wrote in a blog piece about her back in 2014, she was known on campus for her charming Southern accent, her stylish wardrobe, her love of travel, her many artistic hobbies, but perhaps most especially, she was known for her love of dogs. She raised and trained show dogs in addition to all of her other tireless work. She retired from STC just before it transitioned to TSC in 1963 to spend more time on another hobby, traveling. So if you were a student at Towson from 1948 until 1970, you most likely would have encountered Dorothy Reeder. She came to campus to head the library right after World War II, and at that time, the library was actually in Stevens Hall. It housed not only the circulating book collection, but Reeder also cared for items that were valuable to the school's history, such as a teapot given to Sarah Richmond by the Alumni Association and a flag that flew over the old MSNS building. These pieces of school history were the start of my department, actually, Special Collections and University Archives, but more about that in a minute. Some of those items were stored in, of all places, the elevator shaft of Stevens Hall, betraying a clear need for a new library. Almost 10 years after her arrival, Reeder finally got the chance to move the library from Stevens Hall to the newly created Albert S. Cook Library. She'd spent those 10 years making the case for a separate library and then being involved with every part of the construction. But almost as soon as the library opened in 1957, it became obvious that it was already too small for the projected future enrollment of the baby boom generation. Reeder soon began planning the next library, which the school had to sell to the state as a library addition, which is why the Media Center, which is the old Cook Library, and the current Cook Library are attached. Reeder and her staff moved the library again in the summer of 1969. So, after moving the library twice, Reeder stepped down from the library director role, but instead of fully retiring, she was asked to finally wrangle all those historic school items and establish the archives. Reeder spent a year traveling to various institutional archives and learning a whole new skill set. Not only did she establish the department, but she put calls out to the alumni and faculty to begin collecting more material, and not just the objects that she had been storing in the elevator shaft when she arrived. Marvis Barnes and Myra Harris are recognizable to many folks as the first Black students to graduate from Towson. They arrived on campus in the fall of 1955, the year after the U.S. Supreme Court handed down the Brown v. Board of Education decision. Marvis Barnes had graduated from Saunders Point High School and was trying to decide between Morgan State College and Howard University when her math teacher told her family that if she wanted to be a teacher, she should go to the State Teachers College at Towson. She applied and had to take a test administered by Rebecca Tansel. Tansel congratulated her on passing the test, and when Barnes expressed concern about living too far from campus, Tansel replied, "Congratulations, you have a room in the dorm." Tansel is also part of Myra Harris's STC story. Harris had graduated from Frederick Douglass High School in the city and was slated to go to Coppin State Teachers College, which we now know as Coppin State University. Harris recalls meeting with STC's Director of Admissions, Tansel, who told her, "Towson is open to everyone." Both have shared moments of facing racism and discrimination from faculty, fellow students, and the wider Towson community, but they also recognize that they were supported by classmates and staff like Tansel. Both Barnes and Harris graduated in the spring of 1959 and went on to teach in public schools for years, gradually moving up in the school system until they both retired. In almost every photo I've ever seen of Margot Veracruzan, she is wearing a gym uniform. But this photo of her is my favorite. It seems to really speak to who she probably was on the field. She was hired in 1962 as a physical education instructor and coach for field hockey, women's basketball, and women's volleyball. And by 1970, she was also coaching softball. At the time, women's sports at Towson were mostly restricted to intramural play, as they had been since 1926, when the school's athletic association was split into the Women's Athletic Association and the men's. Men's teams were allowed to play varsity sports, but women were told that even though they were the larger number of students enrolled on campus and paying more in athletics fees than the men's teams took precedence. Under Veracruzan, however, the women's basketball team would venture into varsity and junior varsity territory just before the establishment of Title IX in 1972. In 1968, the women's basketball team competed in the first women's National Invitational Tournament, where they beat Ball State, Central Michigan, and Purdue before losing to Southern Illinois. That team and their coach, Veracruzan, were inducted in the Towson Hall of Fame, the earliest women's team that has been included. Helen Jacobson was brought to our attention by the Baltimore Museum of Art, who wanted to include this photo of her in a digital exhibit they created for their BMA Stories page entitled "Preserving the Legacies of Women Artists." Prior to this, I hadn't realized how lucky Towson was to have Jacobson as an instructor. A Baltimore native, Jacobson graduated from the Maryland Institute College of Art and got her start illustrating ads for local department stores. Her own art, however, was classified as abstract expressionist, and her showings won her praise from area art critics. She had a solo show at the BMA, and her work there is on permanent collection. According to The Sun, in 1959, she was the only Marylander to receive an invitation to show in the Art USA 59 show held in New York. There, her work in competition with artists from across the country won one of the 3 regional prizes awarded at the show. In an interview a year later, Jacobson said that abstract painting is part of the long struggle toward the artist's expression of what he thinks and feels about life. She began teaching at Towson State College in 1964 and remained a part of our faculty until 1980. Elaine Hedges joined Towson State College in 1967 as an assistant professor in the English department. Her work was deeply rooted in feminist ideas. As an editor with the Feminist Press, she advanced the publication of Charlotte Perkins Gilman's now classic The Yellow Wallpaper as a work separate from the anthologies in which it usually appeared. This helped cement it, as she wrote in the afterword, as a small literary masterpiece, and Gilman as one of the most commanding feminists of her time. In the early 1970s, Hedges began working with another English faculty member, Sarah Coulter, to create a set of women's study courses at Towson State College, and by 1973, TSC was home to one of the first women's studies departments in the country. By the time Hedges retired in 1995, the Women's Studies program had grown to include 40 faculty members, 50 courses, and reached an average of 2,000 students a year, according to her citation in the Maryland Women's Hall of Fame. Today, it is known as the Women and Gender Studies program. I'm going to take a drink of water because I've done a lot of talking. Marvine Lusky graduated from Towson in 1969 with a dual bachelor's degree in theater and English. She returned the following year to begin teaching theater while also earning her master's in education from TSC in 1972. Her specialty was in mime and movement, and she continued to perform as an actor at Towson and in Baltimore. So I arrived as a student myself in 1990 and briefly flirted with the idea of being an actor. By this point, Lusky and her husband, Dick Gillespie, were the theater department. They just were. While I quickly realized that I couldn't make it in theater, much of the work I did during that time is why I can do things like talk to groups of people about TU's history. From 1997 until 2002, Lusky was Dean of COFAC. She left TU in 2002 to become provost of Wilkes University in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, and then in 2006, she became president of Mansfield University. In September of 2011, she was named TU's 13th president. For 2 short but very intense years, she committed herself to TU and especially the students. She retired in December 2014 after being diagnosed with cancer and died just 6 months later. When Doris Litke came to Towson State College in 1968, one mathematics class called Computer Programming was part of the catalog for that fall. Litke herself was listed as an assistant professor in the mathematics department, but she was for all intents and purposes our first computer science instructor. Litke is a strong advocate in the computing community, not just for computer science education as a whole, but also in thinking about that impact of computers on social and ethical measures. She remained a full-time faculty member at Towson until 2002 and continued to teach part-time until 2009 when she fully retired. In that time, she also began working with one of her alma maters, Johns Hopkins University, to help create the Center for Talented Youth, which works with young academically advanced learners. Since its founding in 1979, it has reached over 165,000 students. Litke has been recognized by the Association for Computing Machinery for Distinguished Service, and in 2000, she was named the Outstanding Faculty Member in the College of Science and Mathematics at TU. Martha Kumar joined the Political Science Department at Towson State College in 1971. She began traveling to the White House in 1975 with a TSC colleague, and they eventually published a book portraying the president, the White House, and the media in 1981. By the mid-90s, Kumar was a regular in the White House press briefing room, observing both the media and the presidents and their staff. She has become an asset on both sides of the lectern, having done deep analysis about the history of the relationships between the presidents and the press. She regularly appears on news networks herself. In 1997, she became the co-founder and director of the White House Transition Project, which, quote, provides nonpartisan expertise in all phases of democratic transitions, from constitution building in emerging democracies to regularized statute-driven transfers of power. Kumar retired from TU in 2010 after almost 40 years of service. And in 2018, she was honored with the President's Award by the White House Correspondents Association. A native of Poland, Cecilia Barczyk studied at the Chopin Academy of Music in Warsaw, the Moscow Conservatory of Music, and the Yale School of Music before coming to Towson State University in 1983 to teach cello. She has continued to perform and received numerous awards for her work while teaching, recording, and creating events celebrating the cello at Towson, St. Petersburg, and Baltimore. Her students have also been recognized, winning both national and international competitions. In 2003, she and her husband, Charles Borowski, began the Intermuse International Music Institute and Festival to work with young people and foster their growth as musicians. After 38 years with TU, Barczyk will retire this year, but it is clear that her work with students has made a lasting impression on the community both here and across the globe. 2 of our buildings are already named after state superintendents of education, Stevens and Cook. Adding Nancy Grasmick's name to that list would be different because she would also be the first graduate of STC on that list. Of course, she already has a building named after her. The State Department of Education building on Baltimore Street was named the Nancy S. Grasmick State Education Building in 2005. What's even more notable about this is that she was still serving as the superintendent of the Maryland Department of Education at the time, a position she held from 1991 until 2011. Grasmick was the first woman to hold that position. In 2012, she was named the Presidential Scholar for Innovation in Teacher and Leader Preparation at Towson University. And this summer, TU will launch the Dr. Nancy Grasmick Leadership Institute to, quote, challenge the status quo of leadership development, to forge a new standard for innovation, practice, and pedagogy, and to prepare the leaders of the future. I feel like I have barely touched the tip of the iceberg. When I think about TU's history, it's hard not to think of all the women who have brought us to this moment in time, including our current president, Dr. Kim Schatzel. So many have made the university what it is and what it will be in the years ahead. Thank you for spending some time with me today. I hope I've given us all some things to think about, and let me know if you have any questions. I'm always happy to do my best to answer them. And I'm going to stop sharing.
Felicity, we did have one question come through and I tried to answer it, but I do want to verify. Can you please share the name of Miss Scarborough that you mentioned that the dorm is named after?
Sure, it's Mary Hudson Scarborough.
Okay, perfect. And at this time, if anyone else has any questions, you're welcome to put them in the chat. I always enjoy Felicity's presentations. I learn something new every time, and we've worked together now for 8 years, I think. So it's been fun.
Yeah, I agree.
All right. Well, I think everyone is just really appreciative of the work that you put into this. I can't thank you enough for joining us again to share some history of Towson University. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes. I'd like to ask all of our guests today to mark your calendars for April 21st. On this date, Tigers around the world will celebrate Towson University through our 3rd annual TU Big Give. TU Big Give is a university-wide 24-hour online fundraising challenge where donors give back to areas of Towson University that mean the most to them, from scholarships, academic and athletic programs to emergency funds, hand-on learning opportunities, and so much more. We just ask that you consider joining us to strengthen our TU community. We'll be sharing more details in the coming weeks. We hope you can join us for some of our other upcoming events. On April 7th, our TU Business and Leadership Alumni Alliance is hosting a special webinar on navigating your career search geared towards recent and soon-to-be graduates. Then on April 13th, we will be hosting an informative session on the ins and outs of car buying with our very own TU alumnus, Jason Goldsmith, CEO and co-founder of CarChecks. Join us then on April 18th for a special concert featuring some of the Department of Music's best ensembles. Prism from Darkness to Light acknowledges our collective human condition during the worldwide pandemic while claiming our movement towards a piece of light and hope. You can register and learn more about these events at alumni.towson.edu. Make sure you follow the TU Alumni Association on our social media channels and on Tiger Connect, our alumni community. You can see those details in your window now. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we do hope to see you next time.